Welcome back, everybody. Joining us right now, Bill Colarulo of Legal Hands to the Face. Bill, nice to be with you again, man. How you doing?
Not too bad, my brother. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. As I started off the show by talking to John McClone about this. Here's how big a day it was in Philadelphia sports yesterday. There was actually a training camp fight, and nobody really talked. People talked about it for like an hour, and then the Phillies threw a no-hitter with Michael Lorenzen on the bump for them last night. So that's pretty incredible. But whenever there's a training camp fight, I don't know what it is, Bill, but it warms my heart to know guys are agitated that early in the process. So the game hasn't even been played yet. Preseason hasn't even started yet. You haven't even had a joint practice yet, and you're literally hitting your own guys to the point where you're taking exception to it. Now, according to John, it was a borderline hit by Landon Dickerson on a bubble screen, a wide receiver screen, and Derek Barnett just took exception to it. It sounded like Barnett didn't like the hit in the setting of practice, and him being a guy coming off an ACL. That's what he took exception to, more so than just the hit itself. The context definitely mattered in this situation. But anytime there's a tussle, I don't know about you, but it warms my heart.
Normally, it would warm my heart. Anybody else, it would warm my heart. But the fact that it is Derek Barnett just rubs me the wrong way, because this is a guy who we have seen since he's come into the league be so undisciplined, and especially with personal foul penalties. And now he gets another one in training camp against his own team. This is a guy I was hopeful was going to come into this season and maybe mature a little bit, maybe finally be able to contribute to this team. Personal foul in practice. I know it's just training camp, but if this is a sign of things to come, that this guy is still undisciplined, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, I don't know how a player gets out of his own way, like a guy like Derek Barnett, who, two things. One, he's pushing to come back from injury. And then on top of that, he's pushing to make sure that he gets himself a roster spot on this team. That's what he's fighting for right now. And the way, and you and I were texting a little bit last night about it, but the way I look at it with Derek Barnett is he's a rotational player. The guy's a rotational player. That is his peak. That is the height of his career, will be a rotational player with the Eagles. Maybe he's able to hit a reset button somewhere else, and he's able to really prove himself as a first-round draft pick. I just don't think it happens here in Philadelphia. I think his ceiling, especially with who's in front of him that are going to be going after the quarterback this year, edge rushers on this team that I think have a far better pedigree than he does. I think he is just fighting for scraps off the table right now when it comes to breaking into this Eagles defensive line.
Well, let me give you the bad first on Derek Barnett, and then I'll try to end it with a little positive here. So the bad has been, in 6 seasons with the Philadelphia Eagles, he has more penalties than he does sacks. He has 29 penalties in his career, 10 personal foul calls, and he only has 21 and a half sacks. So that is the bad, okay?
That's pretty bad.
Pretty bad. Pretty damn bad for a first-round pick taken 14th overall. A guy who, I hate even putting his name in the same sentence as Reggie White anymore, but a guy who broke Reggie White's record at Tennessee for the most sacks in Tennessee history comes into the league and has more penalties than sacks. So a disappointment is an understatement. But the positive here, and I'm grasping at straws here, Farzy.
Okay.
The positive is you look at Brandon Graham. Brandon Graham, at this point in his career, what Derek Barnett has, 6 seasons under his belt, only had 23 and a half sacks. So BG was a guy who came on late, as we know. Since that point, in his next 6 seasons, BG had 46 and a half sacks. So almost double what he had his first 6 seasons. So let's hold out hope. Maybe we see an end of the career for Derek Barnett the way BG has come on late. I don't have confidence, because I just think they're two completely different players. You see the way BG is, and you see the way Derek Barnett is. BG didn't have a problem with discipline. He didn't have a problem with stupid penalties. I mean, and they have been, I don't have any specific memories right now of exact plays. I just remember watching games over the last few years and being so frustrated when you'd see Derek Barnett just take a stupid penalty that really changes the momentum of a game.
Yeah, don't be a guy out there that's going to hurt us. You know, if you're going to be a guy, I understand that you might not help the Eagles, but if you're the Eagles, you're looking at Derek Barnett saying, okay, look, we understand you're not going to do a lot to help us in this situation, but if you could just kind of break even here and not hurt us and not take away from our chances to win a football game, yeah, that's a pretty big step. But Go ahead. No, what?
I mean, he's still only 27 years old. That's the crazy thing. He's been around for a while, but he's still only 27. So it's not as if this guy's career is over. He just has to fix these stupid penalties and get back to the guy he was at Tennessee. We saw his skills in college. He knows how to rush the passer, but he's got to get more disciplined. If Nick Sirianni and Sean Desai want to be able to trust this guy on the field, you mentioned how deep they are at the edge position, you got to be disciplined. You can't hurt the team, as you said, Farzy.
I'll go back to with that 2017 draft and him going 14 overall. I don't want to say he went under the radar because, yes, when you attach Reggie White's name to somebody else in any case, which I always thought the sack record, there should be an asterisk there at Tennessee. When you think about the idea of because he played in how many more games than Reggie White did? It was a huge amount of the games difference between the amount that Derek Barnett played versus the amount that Reggie White only played at college. But he's a 14th overall pick. I remember still, though, people being more hyped about their second round pick that was supposed to be the steal of the draft in Sidney Jones. And that, of course, ended up being a bust here in Philadelphia. He couldn't get over knee issues. The biggest thing he did when he was here is he lost his cell phone at the Super Bowl parade, and a fan returned it to him. That's the biggest thing. But if you look at that draft, nobody really jumps off the page. I mean, Mac Hollins, Rasul Douglas, Donnell Pumphrey in the 4th round. Nate Gary ended up being one of your starting linebackers for you there. Nothing really jumped out to you about that draft that Derek Barnett came in. Their best rookie that year was an undrafted running back named Corey Clement, who ended up coming up with a great record there for himself in the Super Bowl. But it's crazy to think about that draft class. And Derek Barnett was supposed to promise a lot as an edge rusher, and Sidney Jones was supposed to promise a lot. And of the two, they might have given you the least. Of the draft picks they had that year, they might have given you the least when they had a lot of hype coming into the season.
Well, that was before Howie Roseman decided, you know what, just draft Alabama and Georgia players.
You learned a lot.
Right. You just go with the SEC, take the biggest names, and you're going to be just fine. The one thing that Derek Barnett will always be remembered for, though,
of course,
recovering that fumble in Super Bowl 52. So that's his claim to fame. In fact, if you go to the Eagles media guide, they have career highlights, and a lot of guys have a lot of things written. The only thing Barnett has is he recovered the fumble in Super Bowl 52.
Yeah,
because he hasn't done much other than that.
Fell in the right place at the right time. Every time we talk about Derek Barnett, this always comes to mind, and I have a lot of trouble really thinking of somebody like this. But has there been anybody like Derek Barnett across the board, not just football, like across the board in Philadelphia sports, that has had such an important, great moment? Like their best moment is the most important moment, and then there's just nothing. And to your point, I didn't even know that about the Eagles website, but this supports that theory incredibly. That one great play, and then everything else is nothing. Like maybe it's the biggest, that and the Philly special, 2 biggest plays in a franchise's history. And Derek Barnett obviously had a big hand in one of them, recovering that fumble. Brandon Graham made the play. He recovered the fumble. But everything after that, it's like most fantastic thing we've ever seen or nothing. It's hard to think of one person that has had that drastic of a difference in the way they played football.
Well, the reason it's so hard, too, is we haven't had many championships here.
Sure.
And we got the 08 Phillies. We have the, 1983 Sixers. I, unfortunately, was born about a week after the Sixers won the NBA championship in 1983. I thought I was going to go my whole life without seeing a championship. That was my biggest fear. So I've only had the 08 Phillies and the 17 Eagles.
Yeah, we've been few and far between in the championships, unfortunately, but hopefully that changes in the not too distant future here, especially with a guy like Jalen Hurts. One other name I want to get in here regarding the defense. You had mentioned this right at the end of the show yesterday. Somehow, magically, Nakobe Dean was back there on the football field in a limited capacity, back from the ankle injury. But they go out there and they sign Cunningham. They go out there and they sign Miles Jack. And all of a sudden, Nakobe Dean's back out there. Do you think we see him in preseason game number 2? Because I don't think we're seeing him in preseason game number 1.
It's so hard to tell with Sirianni. You never know. I mean, he really puts a value on these joint practices more so than the preseason game. So I don't know if you're going to see Dean. And as much as I was happy they brought in Miles Jack and Zach Cunningham to provide some competition, I don't think that competition is for Nakobe Dean. I think they're pretty solid that Nakobe Dean is going to be their starting linebacker. It's that off-the-ball linebacker that I think they brought these guys in for to compete with Nicholas Morrow. So, yeah, Nakobe Dean comes back yesterday, definitely maybe feeling the pressure a little bit that they brought in other linebackers, but I think this is his job until he proves otherwise in the regular season. So I don't know if you're going to see him in the preseason at all. I hope we do. I think the guy needs – you heard me yesterday. He's only had 34 defensive snaps in the NFL. He only has 13 career tackles. So I would like to see him in the preseason. But with the emphasis that Sirianni and the staff put on keeping these guys healthy, I'm not sure you'll see him.
Yeah, we identified ourselves as people that are optimistic about Nakobe Dean, but we got to see it. And I think that's where the Eagles are at right now. And you know what? If a knock on a player, if like one of the biggest knocks on the player is that he hasn't been spectacular, that's not that bad. That's not terrible, especially when you consider the bar that's been set at the linebacker position for the Eagles over the years. And we don't need to go into that depth chart over the years. There, I already mentioned Nate Gary, but it hasn't been a high bar for the Eagles. But when you look at a guy like Nakobe Dean, he's coming in here with that Georgia Bulldog pedigree. He's coming in here as one of the many Broad Street Bulldogs to be playing on that Eagles defense. So there's a little bit of a desire to see a splash play. And he hasn't provided that quite yet. I don't know if he's going to be the type of guy, and I'm hoping he's the type of guy that needs to be in the game or needs to be going up against somebody who is actual competition that he's going to be facing in a game. I'm talking about those practices, those joint practices that Nick Sirianni literally comes out afterwards and says, well, you know, we won practice today. And it's like, I didn't know you could win that. I didn't think they kept score, but okay. And he's keeping score that they won practice. So if you have a guy like Nakobe Dean that's going to be going up and facing talent that he's not competing for a job with, he's facing talent that he just wants to put in the ground, then maybe you're going to start to see that edge that you need at linebacker. Because, look, you can measure speed. You can measure quickness. You don't need a game necessarily to do that. Sure, instincts and reaction, that matters. And that in a game adds a lot of motivation to a player moving a little bit faster than he does when he's in a game. We won't see that till the game. But until then, I think he just needs some competition in front of him. One that he's not maybe going to start a fight with, like yesterday at practice, where he's actually throwing a shoulder into somebody on the opposing team and showing that he can be physical, showing that he does have those instincts, and will show that at the level that we need him to see, that we need to see him at before they actually step foot on the football field in week 1 against the Patriots.
Yeah, I'd like to see him in the preseason too for those exact reasons. But, you know, what we have to hope, because we have not heard, like you said, any reports from training camp that Nakobe Dean flashed today or he had this great play today. What we have to hope is this is a very intelligent linebacker. This is a guy who, from all accounts, was great at Georgia because he studied a lot of film, was smart at diagnosing plays, being in the right spot at the right time. You don't really do that in preseason practices, in training camp practices. So what we have to hope is this guy is a true gamer, that when the time comes for the regular season to start, he's going to do a lot of film study. The guy, I think he's a bioengineering degree.
Mechanical engineering. This is what fascinates me about it. Mechanical engineering major, and he wants to possibly, maybe, Bill, just maybe, go back for pre-med. Just maybe, if he feels like it. You know, if he's bored in an off season, wants to go back for pre-med. He talked about that like I talked about taking volleyball as an elective my senior year at Temple.
Yeah, so he is a very smart man, no doubt about it. So let's hope that when the season comes, with his film study and his intelligence level and ability to diagnose plays, that we'll start to see some flashes from him at that linebacker position. So let's move away from middle of the linebacking core and talk about some of the outside guys here potentially. Nicholas Morrow. I'm starting to really get the sense, and I don't think I'm alone here. I think it's the majority, actually. His job might not be a lock for the Chicago connection, him, Sean Desai, whatever it might be. It does not seem like that's going to hold a lot of water coming out of training camp. This guy, I mean, talk about Nakobe Dean. You and I and most people think, yes, he's the starting linebacker, middle linebacker for this defense come week 1. But Christian Ellis coming on strong, going out there, getting guys like Cunningham and Jack, and obviously already having that raw talent in Von Sumeren. The guy that they want to mold as a linebacker as well. Nicholas Morrow might be in danger here of losing a job. Yeah, I said it yesterday. You really have to look at their actions. And they only gave Nicholas Morrow a 1-year, $1.15 million deal. They gave Miles Jack and Zach Cunningham more than double that in their 1-year contracts. So I don't think that Nicholas Morrow was a guy that they were very high on anyway. coming into camp. And there's a reason that he was available. There was a reason Chicago, he played 100% of the defensive snaps for the Chicago Bears last year, and they had no problem letting him walk and picking up TJ Edwards. So I think Nicholas Morrow is a good backup linebacker. He's a serviceable linebacker. If he has to come in, he does get a lot of tackles. I think he'd be okay if for some reason he has to step into that position. But I think the Eagles and Howie Roseman wanted to upgrade that off-the-ball linebacker. That's why they brought in Miles Jack and Zach Cunningham. And you're already seeing Miles Jack get first-team reps, which is crazy. I know it's because Nakobe Dean has been out, but they're already giving this guy first-team reps. And then, like you mentioned, too, Christian Ellis, another guy who hasn't played a lot of defensive snaps in the NFL, but a lot of people have been high on him. We talk about Nakobe Dean not making flashes in training camp and OTAs. All you hear coming out of these OTAs and training camp is watch out for Christian Ellis. Another big play today. Another big play against the first-team offense. So I had Barrett Brooks on my podcast recently, and he's been high on Christian Ellis all summer long, saying, watch out for this guy, watch out for this guy. So we'll see how things go. But, yeah, I don't know how much confidence they have in Nick Morrow bringing in not one but two veteran linebackers this week.
All right. When you're a defensive coordinator, there's a couple of things that I'd like to see here. And Sean Desai, obviously, one of the new coordinators on this team, along with Brian Johnson. Brian Johnson's been here for a minute. So Sean Desai is supposed to have this great head on his shoulders. Just talking about him with John McMullen. Very organized, very great attention to detail. Coaches love throwing that out. GMs love throwing that out when they hire somebody, right? So far, very much they've struggled against Jalen Hurts and Marcus Mariota in trying to contain them when they scramble, when they try to buy time behind the pocket or scramble, whatever it might, or behind the line of scrimmage, or scramble. They're having trouble containing the quarterbacks. And then I see this story about Howie Roseman having to yell to Sean Desai that he is running the wrong drill at practice yesterday at the lake. Not an open practice, so nobody was there other than the team and the media. I'm looking for Brian Johnson to just get an opportunity to call plays, and I won't see that until it's time to call plays. But you know what I'm not reading about Brian Johnson? How he is unorganized or doesn't know what drill they are in. You know what I'm reading about Sean Desai right now? He is unorganized and doesn't know what drill they are in right now. At what point do red flags start to really go up about Desai? Do we got to see a defense being burned in a preseason game? Because all we ask for in the training camp sessions is organization, having your guys ready to go. And he apparently did not have that yesterday.
Yeah, that is not a good look. Not a good look at all when your general manager is yelling at your defensive coordinator he's doing the wrong drill. The only thing I guess we could hope is we know Nick Sirianni runs really quick, efficient practices, but Desai better get on the same page, man, because that is not a good look at all. And, we talked about a little bit yesterday, Brian Johnson's play calling, things like that. Sean Desai, you have to be quick. In the NFL, these plays are coming in fast. 2-minute drill is quick. You better, if you can't get a drill organized in training camp, it is not a good look when you're thinking about how you're going to go against these other NFL teams for regular season games. You did mention, too, they haven't been able to stop Hurts and Mariota. The positive there, though, is not many teams could stop Hurts last year.
Right, yeah.
Running the ball. I mean, he's one of the best quarterbacks who can run the ball in the NFL. And they're not really going to see many runners from the quarterback position this season, fortunately. Tua can do it a little bit. They have Josh Allen. They're going to have to play against Kyler Murray, maybe, if he's healthy. But, other than that, there's not a lot of guys who could run the ball from that quarterback position. So that doesn't concern me as much. Jalen Hurts is one of the best that can do it. But not being organized for a drill, that's a problem.
It literally is the bare minimum. It is the bare minimum, Bill, that they just go out there and they just have their guys ready to go. And I understand he's only been a defensive coordinator 1 year in his life, in his NFL career. And he was a head coaching assistant to Pete Carroll when he was in Seattle. And that's a big title. I mean, Andy Reid, when he was in Green Bay all those years ago, was a quarterback's coach. He was a tight ends coach, but people didn't look his way until he had that assistant head coach title attached to his name. So Desai should be a guy that has things well organized. Hopefully it's just a one-time thing and it's a learning curve, whatever it might be. And that's what I'll cross my fingers for. But one thing you said during yesterday's show has not left my brain. And that's the idea, to flip it on the offensive side of the football. Cam Jurgens on this offensive line, more so than Kenny Gainwell, already knowing his career here in Philadelphia, being so good at catching the ball out of the backfield, being able to run plays like that. It's fantastic. DeAndre Swift being acquired. More so than those two acquisitions, the thing that has me most convinced that we're going to see something different from Jalen Hurts and from their play caller this year in Brian Johnson, they're going to be throwing to their running backs this year. Perhaps maybe as much as you saw with Darren Sproles being here, maybe even more. But you're going to be throwing to those guys, not just because they're talented, but because the offensive line might be the best off the line of scrimmage offensive line that we've seen since the days of Trey Thomas being on this offensive line, when you had Brian Westbrook behind the line of scrimmage, catching those screen passes from Donovan McNabb. They might be better equipped now with these interior offensive linemen, Jason Kelce, and to your point, Cam Jurgens, than they have in 20-some years to be running those types of plays, not just with the running backs, but with the offensive line as well. I'm now more convinced, thanks to you, Bill, that they're going to be running that type of play at a higher rate than we have seen since Brian Westbrook was catching those passes.
That's what I'm hoping too, Farzy. This offensive line that the Philadelphia Eagles have, I think, is the most athletic offensive line in the NFL. We know last year they were in the discussion for being the best offensive line in the NFL. I think they can do it again this year, but they're definitely the most athletic. I mean, just look at all these guys. Jordan Mailata, we saw what he could do when he was in the Australian Football League. Now he's doing that from the left tackle position, which is incredible. Landon Dickerson, you mentioned earlier the second-round pick, Sidney Jones, who was hurt, that Howie Roseman missed on. Well, talk about a great draft pick in Landon Dickerson. He was also hurt coming out of college. The Eagles take him in the second round. A lot of people weren't happy about that. Well, that one turned out to be a great pick. Landon Dickerson has a real shot to be a Pro Bowler this year with how good he is at the left guard position. And then Jason Kelce, Hall of Famer, you know his athletic ability. You add Cam Jurgens into the mix and Lane Johnson, who's a former quarterback. This is a very athletic offensive line. I would love to see the Eagles bring back that screen game and have these guys on the move in open space, getting downfield, blocking some of these smaller cornerbacks and safeties, and putting the ball in Kenny Gainwell and DeAndre Swift's hands. This is going to be a really fun offensive line to watch.
It absolutely is. The other thing about that particular play is that they have so many different ways to beat you. It's not just with the screen, but I can see those wheel routes coming back as well. That goes a little bit more towards the idea of the running back having wide receiver hands, as Nick Sirianni talked about with DeAndre Swift, seeing those kind of routes where you don't have to worry about your offensive lineman getting off the line of scrimmage and getting downfield to make blocks for you, but you just literally dial up that play. On that note, how often, because I'm thinking about this as well, are we going to see, like we saw with Darren Sproles lined up in the slot a lot of times with Doug Peterson's offense, are we going to see DeAndre Swift line up in that spot as well? And I'm not just talking about him lining up there as a technical wide receiver screen where he's going to be popping under for a bubble screen or anything like that, but actually have him up there maybe running, 5 and ins, whatever, a slant route, something like that. Do you think we're going to see him as that diverse a receiver in this Eagles offense?
I do. I do think you're going to see him spread out a little bit. And I think a lot of that's going to come down to how good is Quez Watkins going to be this year. Again, all these reports coming out of training camp is he's had a great camp. He's come in with a great mindset. If he can actually step up to be the wide receiver 3 that everybody was hopeful we were going to see last year, you may not see Swift lined up in that slot as much. But if the Eagles need to improve that wide receiver 3 position, a way to do it is by putting Swift in the slot. And it's also nice because, we were talking about these defenses and being able to adjust quickly on the fly, is they see the personnel that's coming into the game and they're able to adjust accordingly. It's nice to have a running back that can flex out to the wide receiver position, because now you may get a mismatch where there's a linebacker on DeAndre Swift in the slot. And that's going to be a really tough ask for a linebacker to try to guard him.
Mm-hmm. All right, coming up, first off, 9 o'clock today, or 9:30 today, we're going to talk to Mike Gill of 97.3 ESPN South Jersey. We'll get into all things Eagles with him. We'll continue the conversation about running backs, linebackers. We also have to talk about the Dallas Cowboys, because they already have some offseason drama brewing down there. Jerry Jones has already been talking that smack, or at least attempting to talk the smack, because we don't really take it that seriously here in Philadelphia. More point and laugh at it and say, oh, that's adorable, whenever the Cowboys have an issue. And Eric Bieniemy. This story out of Washington is fascinating to me because apparently Eric Bieniemy, Bill, is it's a little bit of a hard ass. And apparently today's NFL player doesn't enjoy that too much. But Eric Bieniemy apparently is getting in people's faces. He's trying to rally guys to rally their emotions. He's trying to motivate them as much as he possibly can. And Ron Rivera didn't help the situation. He talked about it, and then shortly thereafter had to read from a pre-written statement about his new offensive coordinator, a guy that many thought should have been a head coach in the NFL many years ago. It's apparently rubbing the modern NFL player a little too wrong, apparently. So we'll get into that conversation because it has to do in our division, and we will talk about any legitimate threat the Eagles have in the NFC East. So we'll get to all that and more coming up here on Birds 365.